The second I learned marketing is the second I started creating seven-figure businesses almost overnight. I launched a company recently and it hit seven figures within 5 months. It's like, oh, I want to build a $100 million business or I want to build a $1 billion business. What they're not thinking about is all of the negative repercussions that come with running a $1 billion business. In a startup, it's all about product market fit. You're the artist, you're the creator. But in scale up, now you're building a team. You're no longer in product creation, you're in company creation. So now you are focused on hiring the executive team, building the culture in the business, laying the foundation. And then when you're at 100 million and beyond, you're in grow up mode. And it's a completely different ecosystem. You have 100 plus employees. And I've seen multiple founders build $100 million business and go, I don't know if I'm more happy now than I was then. And your number one job as a founder in the beginning of the business is building momentum. That's what plagues a lot of founders is shiny object syndrome. Let me just start the next thing rather than doubling down on the current thing.
What's up, people? Before we get into this video, please make sure to subscribe, like, and comment down below so we can get bigger and better guests for you every single week. Let's get straight into the video right now. All right, man. Let's kick off. Let's do this.
Awesome.
All right. Where I want to start is with your writing, of course, which has been very helpful for me over the past couple of months. So as someone who has done both, growing an 80 million a year business probably won't make you any happier than growing an 8 million a year business. Choose your goals based on the life you want to live, not because you think a larger number will bring you more fulfillment. Why is that?
I think oftentimes people are chasing that status number. It's like, oh, I want to build a $100 million business or I want to build a $1 billion business rather than analyzing actually what is going to make my life better than where it is right now. And I think oftentimes when people think of these large numbers, what they're not thinking about is all of the negative repercussions that come with running a $1 billion business. So I use this framework, startup, scale up, grow up. In a startup, it's all about product market fit. You're the artist, you're the creator, you're working directly with the customer. That's a lot of fun for an artist. But in scale up, now you're building a team. You're no longer in product creation, you're in company creation. And so now you are focused on hiring the executive team, building the culture in the business, laying the foundation. And then when you're at 100 million and beyond, you're in grow up mode. And grow up is almost like a small city. You have 100 plus employees. You're almost a politician at that point. You have less of an impact on the bottom line. You're in HR compliance meetings, and it's a completely different ecosystem. And I've seen multiple founders build $100 million business and go, I remember when it was just 10 people. And honestly, it was a lot more fun then. And I don't know if I'm more happy now than I was then. And so I think it's important for you to get really crystal. I call this the corner office test. Go and meet with someone that's living the life you think you want to live and see, would you trade lives with them? And oftentimes when you're looking at that corner office and you see that person, they're overworked, overstressed, built in a position, they have essentially created a goal and created a life that they now dread. And it's because they were never intentional about the life they wanted to live.
Looking at that corner office test, that's applicable for all aspects of life. Right?
100%.
I know you came from Microsoft. I was in Accenture. I was in investment banking. I was in fintech. And a guy on my podcast, his name is Yusuf Smith, he calls it the big boss test. Look at your boss, look at your boss's boss, and are they fundamentally happy? Because if you're not careful, that's where you're going to lead yourself.
That's right.
And that's why I ended up leaving those companies.
Good.
I looked at that and thought, that same effect. Now, in the business world, it gets a bit more complicated because you think, we're at 6 figures, we want to get to 7 figures. If we got to 8 figures, do you think my life would be better because I have more financial resources to take care of the family around me? On the flip side, maybe if you didn't push as hard, the business will start declining. Did you ever feel that yourself? Because that's something that keeps me up at night. Is when we get to a milestone, it's like, that's great, but let's not fuck this and end up back at square one.
100. And your number one job as a founder in the beginning of the business is building momentum and it's 100% pushing a boulder up a hill. And the second you stop pushing, you felt it. The boulder starts to come back on top of you. And so that's actually normal and actually exactly what you want, because the issue is right as you're approaching early 7 figures, let's say 2 to 3 million, that is the awkward haircut phase of business, right? You're just now starting to make a little decent amount of money, but you're not making enough to hire the exec team. You're not making enough to really get yourself out of the business. And so it does require a little bit more push. You are still the player on the field, and it does require you to play the full 42 every single night in order to make sure that you are winning the game. But if you push forward a little bit more, get a little bit more profitability, work on the right things, build the right model, then you can start to hire an exec team. And I will say that as you approach 10 million tends to be a really good sweet spot because you're still you're closely involved with the customers. you have enough profit where you've now built a team. You're no longer deeply involved in the business, um, but you no longer need to be pushing yourself. Rather, the company can be pushing on your behalf.
Are you familiar with Daniel Priestley at all?
No, I'm not.
I think you should check out. He's
Mm.
written a lot of great books. One called Oversubscribed, which is about building up demand.
Oh, I'm familiar with that book. Yeah.
Key Person of Influence.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, Daniel was on a podcast. He's a great dude, and he
Hmm.
said the sweets or the worry for a company is at 13 employees because you don't have enough money to hire an executive team,
Hmm.
and it's now beginning to become fractured that people have their best friends in a company.
Yeah,
They split off into separate teams.
that's
You
right.
know, for us, we have a production team. You might have a design team one day, and as a result, then it becomes fractured. And you're also at a point whereby your expenses are pretty high, so you need to keep things moving, and that's like he calls it that the chasm whereby people can fail, businesses just collapse,
Yeah.
or they push on to become more successful.
Yeah. One of my recommendations is that uh, during this phase, when you're 100% right, there's a big lack of redundancy in key roles. And so, what you want to do is instead of building out a team fully of full time employees, is build a team built of contractors and agencies.
Mm.
And what with contractors and agencies and not hiring and relying on just one, but rather a small team, it allows you to make sure that there isn't that key person
Mm.
risk because it's very, very common. You typically can punch through that once you get to around 20, 30 employees. Now you start to have a little bit more redundancy. But yeah, I mean, before 15, I mean, everyone is doing, you have one customer support person, you have one salesperson.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can rely on that one person, or you can have that one person and maybe a backup contractor that's
Mm.
supporting them.
Okay, that was a good beginning. I think there's a lot of great points I want to get into, and we go across this whole kind of spectrum. So startup phase, scale up phase, and the grow up phase. Now, you've observed all of this, and you've gone from building your own companies in the beginning to moving into even traditional paths of working at Microsoft. When you were in early stages, you had a couple of companies in your early 20s. What kind of struggles did you have, and why weren't they kind of like growing?
So I started several companies in high school and college, two of them being the most successful that I actually ended up exiting in similar phases to you, mid six figures.
What were
In
they? Am I
So
listening?
one was an online e-commerce blog, and so it was sort of like a Men's Health meets GQ magazine.
Cool.
And I accidentally discovered what SEO was back then. It was a lot easier to rank back then, and grew that blog, and it became incredibly successful. And then I also had a financial advisory firm, and both of them were getting stuck at around six figures. And it was because when we go back to the startup phase, the startup is all about persona, problem, and promotion. I had nailed persona. I had nailed the problem and how we were going to serve it. What I was struggling at was that promotion component.
Mhm.
I accidentally discovered SEO, but I didn't know how to optimize SEO even more.
Mhm.
With the financial advisory firm, I had figured out how to do sales and marketing, but I didn't know how to scale the actual model behind it. And
Mhm.
so, what was stopping me from growth was that promotion element. And when I sold them and decided to jump back into entrepreneurship, I was like, I can either go out and start a business again and probably hit the same ceiling
Mhm.
because my thought was, oh, it was the idea. That's why I kept starting new companies. It's
Mhm.
the idea. Let me start something new. That's what plagues a lot of founders is shiny object syndrome at this early six figure, seven figure range. Is let me just start the next thing rather than doubling down on the current thing
Mhm.
and really punching through that plateau. And the second I learned marketing is the second I started creating seven figure businesses almost overnight. I mean, I launched a company recently and it hit seven figures within 5 months simply because I nailed that final component.
Are you familiar with Eric Sue?
Of course, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Eric's it's
Eric's a man.
he's a great guy,
Yeah.
and what I love about him is the fact that he's stuck with his agency for so many years. He
Mm,
bought it at 27. I don't know what age he is now, but it's been quite some time, right? And he often says that the grass is greener where you water it,
that's right.
right? And I always think about that. He was like, everything works. It all works.
That's right.
All the businesses work. It's just about where you're willing to water it and stick to that time.
That's right.
Now, what was that component of promotion that you neglected? Because you got to six figures, which is pretty good, right? So
Hmm.
you were able to either, what was it? Were you running ads or were you doing sales? Like, what was the different component that you were doing and
I
lacking?
just didn't even know.
Okay.
I really didn't understand marketing whatsoever. I
Mm.
didn't understand how important marketing. So the easiest framework that I think about for marketing, I believe, is from Greg Eisenberg. He has a great framework called the ATM framework, which
Okay.
is attention, trust, money.
Mhm.
And number one, I didn't know how to garner attention.
Mhm.
Number two, I didn't know how to turn that attention into trust. And then lastly, I didn't know how to turn that trust into money. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't really until I really was able to look at the way AppSumo was doing things. which when I was able to step in, it was already doing seven figures. It
Mhm.
already had an incredible marketing engine. It was like, oh, it was like a light bulb moment to me. It's like, this is how we create attention. This is how we convert that attention into trust. And then this is that how that trust gets translated into money. And until you've figured out how to think about that funnel,
Mhm.
it becomes really difficult for you to create a 7, 8, 9 figure business.
How is that marketing funnel different for a business than a creator? We see people like Sahil, Greg,
Hmm.
Eric in particular. They're such an authority figure that they can write this content just like you, and they're building up that trust bank. And then
Hmm.
eventually, then they don't even need to try ask for deposits; it will just happen to them,
That's right.
right? How does that differ from a company?
It doesn't. It really doesn't. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really how are we creating that attention trust marketing framework?
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether it's an individual or it's a company, you're
Mm-hmm.
still going through that same ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the more that you're able, so let's just use um, Tesla famously does not spend a single dollar on advertising. So, what is their major lever for attention? It's press. Elon's master at writing a tweet that gets a million articles.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes these articles will be very favorable to Tesla. And he's done a really good job of essentially grooming these these publicists
Mm-hmm.
and these journalists to get insider access to Tesla. And so those favorable articles actually garner trust because hey, this is from the Wall Street Journal or this is from the New York
Mm-hmm.
Times. They inherently already have that trust factor built in
Mm-hmm.
versus some random Facebook ad. So,
Interesting. It seems more risky, right? If you think about it, if their dependency is on an external party
totally,
to promote it,
it is.
and obviously like Elon's run into like a lot of I'd say mixed reviews. Like people are either on one spectrum and the other spectrum as a result.
Yeah,
Is there like would you look at that now as a CEO, right? Because they have big problems because they're a big company, but it's the same at a small company. It's the
that's
same
right.
degree, right? These promotional methods don't change.
They don't.
You don't unlock a new one
Yeah.
as time goes on, right?
No, 100%. I mean, it's 100% riskier, but it's what has worked for Elon. And I think he's done, if you really analyze how smart he's been about the relationships he's built with journalists,
Yeah.
he invites them into his inner circle. He gives them the factory tours.
Mm.
But the second they write a unfavorable article about him, he blackballs them, cuts them out. They no longer get this insider access.
Mm.
And so he's done a really good job over the last 10 plus years of garnering some incredibly positive press
Mm.
where everyone else is getting tarnished and trashed. And now, recently that has flipped, obviously, with the purchase of X.
Yep.
And so, what does that tell you? It's like, well, I mean, that's inherently risky, but all marketing channels are risky, right? Facebook could change its algorithm. Twitter could get bought out.
Mm.
Um, Snapchat could go away. Like every marketing channel inherently has its own risk. And so, as you get bigger, you want to diversify those channels.
Yep.
But at the core, whether you're a creator or whether you're a company, it still comes down to that attention, trust, marketing.
And I think I'm just trying to relate this back even to people that are in my circle or even listeners, because like a lot of our listeners will be in the scale up or startup phase, but the scale up is where we want to kind of get to, right? Just
That's
for
right.
kind of context. And I just even think about our own ideas. So the persona, product, and promotion. Our product is constantly evolving and improving because the standard is getting higher,
Mm,
right? So we're just getting better. Our persona is getting more ironed out. But on the promotion side, when Hormozy dropped the purple Bible, as I call it, and the blue Bible, the new one, it's like you are almost want to jump to the other stuff because you know that works too, right? So
totally.
the ads work, or sales outreach works, content works, it all works.
Hmm.
But if I think about what's been more beneficial for us, it's been our outreach because of my podcast, I got good at writing emails
That's right.
and I got good at getting people on my podcast, and then because of that, I got really good at doing sales outreach.
Mm,
Um, some of it being automated, some of it being Loom videos. Me
nice.
sending Loom videos to founders.
Yeah.
Some people telling me to go F myself, and then other people
Yeah.
enjoying it, right? But I just think about how, as we've grown, I've maybe even thought about maybe we can rely more on content because it's easier.
Mm.
How do you think about that when you're coaching founders?
I mean, the fact that it's working for you, to me, I think that to me is marketing. I mean, let's go back to the definition of marketing. What is marketing? Marketing is getting people to want to do business with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's not about the channel. It's not about what you're doing. It is just getting people to want to do business with you. And that includes the way you're getting in front of them. That's how you're getting the eyeballs, how you're converting that into trust, how you are helping them come up to their own decision. And so for you right now, you need to ask yourself, could cold outreach scale us to seven figures? If yes, then let's just focus on getting much better at that. versus,
Mm.
hey, let's go and try to figure out a new channel. Because one of the things that I love about cold outreach is email tends to be very open, tends to be, you can't get blocked. You can't,
Mm.
Zuckerberg is not going to stop you from sending an email. And as long as you're maintaining decent domain authority and not getting blocked by Google,
Mhm.
you can send as many cold emails as you'd like,
Mm.
as long as they're personalized and you're not going to get hit with the spam block because you're probably sending these personalized Loom videos that are getting high engagement and allow you to get the right clients. Additionally, for your particular business, you are having, it's not about scale, it's about the relationships. And so it's much better to have a hyper targeted approach
Mm.
rather than doing content for the masses. I say this all the time, but even this works even for marketing. Running a marketing campaign without an ideal client in mind is like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern. Well, for you, you're literally writing a love letter directly to
Mhm.
that director of marketing at that company. And to
Mm.
me, I think that Loom video is a direct love letter to solving a problem that they currently have. I think it's fantastic. Keep it going.
Yeah, it's just very interesting to analyze because often what got you to 0 to 1 might get you to 1 to 10, right? But people think it's different.
They
They
do.
see,
Yeah.
they see. I'll give you a good example, like the morning routines, right?
Mm.
Um, Jeff Bezos didn't have a morning routine,
Yeah.
and now he does, and everyone's now looking at his current one and
Mm.
thinking that's what he did back then. Now, does that make sense? Right?
100%.
Like he used to just bang out code,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Now they work. I know you have yours, I have mine, and they work, but it's kind of like a shiny penny syndrome.
That's
And
right.
keeping that focus intact now. So looking at kind of gone through the promotion aspect, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on even uh, like when do you know that it's working, and when do you know you should kind of cut down different aspects? When should you move on to different channels, and when should you make that change? Is that only in a scale up phase?
So the only real reason to change a marketing channel is for diversification.
Mm.
Because I think you can actually scale a marketing channel, a single marketing channel to $100 million. I mean, I've seen several companies
Mm.
being built on the back of a single marketing channel. The problem with that is overnight the algorithm can change.
Mhm.
And so the only reason that you're really diversifying is to hedge your bets.
Mhm.
And so to me, the way I think about it is similar to an investment philosophy, which is how are you looking at your portfolio? Are you aping into an NFT? Probably not a good idea, right? Versus, hey, 80% is going to go into index funds. It's
Mhm.
worked. It's going to continue to work. It's probably going to work for the next 30 years.
Mhm.
But 10% might go into crypto and 10% might go into treasuries and bonds.
Mm.
And so when you're thinking about that investment for philosophy, you should have that same investment philosophy with your marketing spend.
Mm.
And so that includes your hires, that includes your attention, that includes your spend. And so if you're thinking about it from an investment philosophy standpoint, what does your portfolio look like and what yield are you getting year over year?
Mm.
And the more that you can analyze it the same way you look at your Fidelity account, the easier it will be for you to manage your portfolio and reallocate resources accordingly.
Understanding the numbers too, right?
100%. You have to.
And that's the gap. Even one of my mates recently, he's running a very very successful business, kind of creator led business, doing 100K, 200K a month. But the dude didn't have an understanding of his P&L. He was burning money on all random shit, right? He might
Mm.
run up some ads and do vice versa, but didn't really have a true transparency of where that was. Whereas I kind of did it. I tried to do it in reverse, whereby we keep an eye on like a 75% margin. How can we stay in around that margin as we're growing up, right? See, is that possible? Now, there's different ways to slice and dice it, but without having that idea of numbers, you kind of have no idea what you're doing, right?
100%. I mean, to me, each stage of the business, you're getting a new dashboard. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're first starting out, it's a tricycle, it's a bicycle. You've got maybe two dials. There's not really much to look at. As you get close into 6, 7 figures, now all of a sudden you're driving a car. You've got a speedometer, you've got the check engine light, you've got a few more dials that you need to monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And you're 100% right. Like your friend going 100 miles an hour, but doesn't realize he's running out of gas. And
Yeah.
what good is a Ferrari sitting in the driveway with no gas in them?
Yeah.
It's like we need both, right?
100%.
Right. We need the revenue. We also need the cash in the bank,
Mm.
and the gas in the bank is the cash in the bank. And so when we think about that, um, as we get more and more advanced, you will not graduate your business. You will not graduate the vehicle you are in until you've learned to master the one you're currently in. And
Mm.
so you will not go from the car to the plane until you figured out how to master the car you're driving.
You've so much wise like elements that you've learned over the years. I love to kind of go into like where that kind of wisdom comes from, right? Because you've had a very diverse career, and now you speak with such clarity. And I wonder kind of where that kind of came from because you write really well, you speak really well, You had those businesses and you went back into kind of a traditional path then, which has been a lot of handbrakes, right? Which is what happens as an entrepreneur too.
Right.
But what's kind of been your kind of philosophy for even like learning and how you've developed this like vast education?
I tell CEOs they don't really become a CEO until they're crying over their P&L Thanksgiving Day,
That's me.
going, yeah.
That's me.
So that is your diploma. It's
Yeah.
like, congratulations, you're officially CEO.
That's doing it though. You get
Yeah.
me? Like you've done it, but you also have this retrospective
Yeah. Well,
ability.
I've also cried over the
Yeah.
P&L. And so um, I recognize like, oh, I almost put this company out of business. And until you've cried over your P&L going, I don't know if I'm going to make payroll next month.
Mhm.
Um, that's obviously the easiest way to learn and also the hardest way to learn, which is getting smacked by a truck
Mhm.
and going, I need to learn this now or this business is going to fail. If you can get smarter, you can learn from others' mistakes.
Mhm.
And if you can get even smarter, you can learn from the lessons that have been passed down from others via books, courses, conferences.
Mhm.
And so the more that you can go one step ahead, go, what problem am I going to run it? I think we were talking about this before the podcast got recorded. Stop reading books about raising a teenager when you have a colicky baby in front of you.
Mhm.
What problem am I dealing with right now? And who's the best in the world that I can call, that I can reach out to, that I can hire potentially as a coach or an advisor and steal their 10,000 hours and immediately solve this problem right in front of me?
Mhm.
The good news is none of us have original ideas.
Yeah.
None of us are running really original businesses other than Elon, who's trying to get people to Mars. All of us have probably done something similar to something else. And so there's probably someone out there that's either written a book, done a course, has a mastermind, or you can hire as a coach to help solve the problem you're currently dealing with. And whatever that problem is worth to you, anything you spend less than that to learn it is positive ROI. And
Mhm.
so if what's blocking you from $1 million in revenue is a mastermind that cost you 50,000, and it's like that's going to take me from 500 to a million, that's a $450 delta.
Mhm.
Positive ROI. If you could get that in Facebook, you'd spend that $50,000 tomorrow. But
100%.
all of a sudden, because it's a learning opportunity, people automatically balk at it. I was like, I wouldn't
Mhm.
spend that. It's like, well, why wouldn't you?
And kind of the guarantee too, right? They're like, oh, I want to be able to learn this. As in, I want to spend this money,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to guarantee I get it. Now, I'll give you an example of where that may work. Is like you can read the best books
Mm-hmm.
on X, Y, and Z because you know so many people that you know have done it and
Totally.
read that book. And I'll give you a good example. We were looking at like our reading list for next year, and I
Mm.
wanted to pull through stuff that I knew was like actionable. That was like sales, marketing, systems. What else was there? Brand.
Yep.
There are four categories. And Elise was laughing at me because I bought like 20 books that I'm going to bring back with me.
Yeah,
But again, it's about not just wasting my time
that's
burning
right.
through a piece of paper, but are they actually going to drive the needle?
That's right.
So, how do you determine, well, two things, what's going to work really well like that, or even a coach to work with? Because, there's so many people that are selling these services or coaching or programs. How do you weed between the bullshit to 90 degrees?
Yeah. Well, I consider all of these learning opportunities like prescription drugs. So,
Mm,
what is the ailment that I'm currently dealing with? And then,
mm,
how do I get the minimum effective dose in order to solve that problem? And so,
true.
to me, if we can jump into a book, honestly, if you read 5, 10 books on a certain category or a certain problem, you're probably going to punch through the problem. And that costs you what? Less than Ben Franklin, single $100 bill, and you solved your problem. That's probably going to unlock $1 million in revenue. And here's the best part: you don't even have to finish the book.
Mm,
9 times out of 10, you can figure out the solution within the first 2 chapters,
100%.
and then you can move on. Here's even better: probably the person's done a podcast promoting the book. Watch it at 2x. You've solved it within half an hour. You're watching it at 2x speed.
Mm,
So let's do the minimum effective dose. But sometimes, as the businesses scale, that problems get a little harder,
mm,
and it's no longer can be fixed by a simple book or a simple issue.
mm,
They're multifaceted. They're much more difficult, and so that's where you need to reach out to your network, find out, hey, what did you think about this person's mastermind? What did you think about this person as a coach? And try to solve that problem
mm,
directly with that person. But I'm hiring them for a very acute problem. It's like, hey, I need to get better at sales. Who's the best sales coach? Oh, I need to get better at marketing. Who's the best Facebook ads marketing course out there?
yeah.
Let me just go learn that one skill. Or even better, how do I go and hire someone that's doing that job, maybe $200, $300 an hour, and have them advise me, or maybe
Mm,
even look over my current agency and review the work that they're doing.
mm. Yeah, because there is that opportunity too, like a fractional basis. So you might know Ken Yarmosh. Great dude, awesome guy. Worked very closely with him,
Mm,
and he's built software agencies. So got like 7 figures. He's done like multi 6 figure months.
mm,
So it made a lot of sense to work with him, right? Because
mm,
he's been doing it for like 15, 20 years. He's helped
totally.
thousands of people do it.
Yeah.
But it's about, okay, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? Because people, there's a misconception with the kind of the coaching space that the buyer thinks that because I paid, the problem is gone, right? You might even see this as well.
Yeah.
People are not as accountable.
Yeah.
They don't feel it. Now, my bodybuilding coach, he often runs into that. People will pay for his coaching, and the guys will still cheat on their meals and not go to the gym and go out and party and take a load of fucking drugs and drink. But they've already paying for the service. So it is kind of that personal responsibility and personal accountability that you still need to have.
I tell all my clients, I can't do your push-ups.
Mm,
You know, you are at the end of the day the number one head coach of yourself because you're the one living with you 24/7.
mm,
And so you're 100% right. When people pay, they think they're paying for the solution. No, you're paying for the knowledge.
yeah,
You're the one that has to implement that.
mm.
And unless you're ready to commit to solving that problem, then honestly, it's a waste of time for you to be spending that money.
I love your philosophy on like investing in yourself and investing in your coaching and investing in everything. And it is really apparent in you. I think the best way to get people on your way of thinking is to lead by example,
Mm.
right? And you're someone who like fit, healthy, well put together. You've built businesses, right? How do you think about kind of investing in yourself from that perspective? Because you set aside time for your gym work, set aside time for your food, I imagine, making sure that it's all aligned and probably going to the right restaurants and so on. Because I see that feed into your content and your work, right? I think it's a nice kind of marriage, how it's a symbiotic relationship between the two.
Darren, you're buttering me up here to the point where I don't even know the question.
The point is like the investments you make in yourself,
Right.
like how do you value these? Because you obviously value them across different aspects of your life.
That is a great question. Why, why do I value these?
Yeah.
Why do I value these investments? You know, I remember when we hired our first intern at AppSumo, paid them $15 an hour. And that person was taking a lot of the tedious work off my plate of getting a deal live. And when they were able to take a few hours from my week off my plate, and I was able to reinvest that back into doing more sales,
Mhm.
almost overnight the business doubled. We literally could see the second this person was hired, the very next month we doubled in terms of our revenue. And so to me, when I think about these investments, it's a dollar out for $10 back in, almost everything. When I think about a CEO doesn't have expenses, they have investments. And when you look at any CEO's P&L, every expense should map to some level of future forward-facing revenue.
Mm.
And that philosophy, I'm constantly getting rewarded whenever I'm investing in the right things. I always see that money come back tenfold. And it's this growth mindset rather than a scarcity mindset that has allowed me to see how do I invest more? How do I invest this next $100,000 in order to bring back 1 million?
Mm.
How do I invest this next million to bring back 10? And when you're thinking about investing in your business, when you're thinking about investing in yourself, I literally was talking to a client yesterday that just cut a multi 6 figure check to the IRS. And I was like, all of that was wasted money because there were so many hires we could have made for next year in order to grow the business. And he's like, you know, as a new client, he's like, "Ah, you're right, Ayman."
Mm.
He's like, got upset. He's like, we literally underinvested in the business. And because of that, we had to pay a high tax bill.
Mm.
And so what I'm constantly doing is going, how do I continuously find opportunities where I can spend one to make back 10?
Mm.
And I'm always rewarded every time I make that investment.
I love the mindset kind of shift in that aspect, and I don't know where I heard this from. I'm kind of gonna steal it if I don't get the right name for it. But it's like entrepreneurship is a pursuit of self development, and like the disguise in the quest for profitability. But it's
Oh, I
really
like
about
that.
yourself, right? At the end of the day,
That's right.
and that individual probably came from an area of scarcity, being like, I don't want to spend this cash because what happens in the future,
That's right.
you know? So they're not in that approach now. You've had like these kind of turning points for yourself, and like how do you think you kind of overcame them limiting beliefs, especially going from 6 figures to 7 figures to 8 and 9, because like there is that kind of like pressure, downward pressure, I think,
Yeah.
thinking you may not be able to do it.
You know, we all have heard of the glass ceiling. One of the things that I think about is the mind ceiling, which is you are making exactly the amount of money you think you deserve to be making.
Hmm. I like
And
that.
the second you start to surround yourself with individuals that are making more, the second you start to normalize making more is normal. And the second you start to develop the skills that give you the confidence that make you think that you deserve more is the second you start earning more. I'm sure you felt that multiple times in your life.
Mm.
And the second that you are able to recognize that in yourself, it allows you to then make those investments in a way that goes, well, I know I deserve 8 figures. I know I deserve 9 figures. How do I make those investments? How do I hire that exec team in order to make that happen? And I think it's just a direct result of number one, matching that ambition,
Mm.
adding the skills necessary in order to make that happen, and then surrounding yourself with the right people that support you on those goals.
Did you ever run into challenges like that whereby you felt you couldn't overcome it?
You know, people think growth is a ramp and it's a staircase. And there are going to be multiple moments in the growth of any business where you're going to see a flatlining. The flatlining is a natural part of growth in any company. So in 2017, we were running into the bottleneck that we had at the time, which was our tech. Our website was constantly crashing. PayPal was basically non-functional. We were supporting our own version of Python from 10 that was 10 years old. That was no longer being supported. And I go, we can either keep pushing through and patching the current platform, or we can take a step back and rebuild the ecosystem. And that was a moment where it's like, is this it? Is this the top that we can grow? Or are we going to fix this plateau, fix this bottleneck, and rebuild the tech in order for us to scale and no longer let it to be the limit? And that year we did not grow. You know, we were pretty flat year over year, but the very next year we almost doubled. And it was a direct result of that investment. And so there are multiple times. I mean, you're constantly running into issues where you're like, this is it. This is the problem that I can't fix. And there was a lot of sleepless nights. The launch of that new website was botched. We were on 24/7 chat support because the bugs were insane in the new platform because you're building an entire 8-figure business almost within 2 months with 2 engineers at the time. Yeah. And so it was very difficult. And we were doing late night chats and trying to help solve
For
people.
AppSumo.
Or AppSumo. Yeah.
It's such a small team.
Yeah, we had a super small team back then.
What?
Yeah, I mean it was just me in 2015, and
Doing 3 million.
at 3 million. Yep. And then at 2017, I think we were less than 10. We had 2 engineers at the time, one junior engineer.
That's the thing with software, right?
Yeah,
Is like
it's
obviously
scalable.
obviously when something goes wrong, it's an absolute shit show. But
Right.
if you do crack that product market fit, like I came from a product background, like I had 20 engineers in our team, but it's just being able to get that right. Going back to the very beginning, the
Totally.
startup phase, that persona.
Well, if you go to persona and the problem, so the problem is the model,
Yeah.
and how are you solving that problem? And so AppSumo's got an incredible model. It's incredibly scalable.
Yeah.
But I was literally talking to a friend yesterday that runs a D2C company where they are shipping directly from the factory, and he's just handling the marketing. They did $10 million last year, or in 2023. They're doing $10 million with one employee, just him, 50% margins. And so when you think about the model, then all of a sudden you got to fix, well, if we got the great model, we just need to nail promotion. And he's obviously nailed promotion. I mean, he's spent millions of dollars just on promotion. He spent $100,000 just on his marketing campaigns, just on the design of the marketing campaigns.
Well, it goes into the goal then, right?
That's right.
He did that so that he can be 10x return as a result.
That's right.
You know, there's an overlap here between the scale up phase in terms of the people and the processes as they feed into the startup. I'm kind of seeing a kind of overlap, and something that I definitely struggle with, or I think about a lot, is the process, right? So is it important to be focused on the process, which is in the scale up phase, in the startup phase, in terms of like processing the company, automation, stuff like this, or are you focused on the wrong stuff?
You're focused on the wrong stuff. You know, in the startup phase, the CEO is the chief emergency officer. And that's okay. You're supposed to be running around figuring out how to do things. You do not want to over-engineer every single process this early. Having said that, if there are critical components in the business, so things that are customer facing, that actually is going to stop you from growth if you screw that up. And so those are the areas where you need the SOPs in the process. In an ideal world, the best business in the world is a computer plugged into the wall with the send button. And so if you could automate as much as you can, because if you can have that fully automated, like that friend I just talked about, where everything is being shipped directly from the factory, it's literally fully automated, never needs to hire, doesn't need to worry about that. Maybe hires a handful of key employees, but we can immediately eliminate complexity over time. So for a company that's at 6 figures, 7 figures, we don't want to over engineer. We want to have some light processes on the most critical components. But we also we want to remain flexible because you have yet to figure out what is actually the best. You're going to be optimizing for the local maxima rather than the global maxima. And so you want to give a little bit more flexibility to you and the team to find maybe a better, more optimal route in order to get that same result. And that's the key. At that stage, what we care most about is the result, not the way we got there.
So it's all about the outcome.
That's right.
That's very, very interesting because there is a process of like over engineering for no reason. And the reason why I asked that is because one of my mates who was on the podcast, Luke Ward, he's like a automation expert. His name on Twitter is like a Zapier Wizard, right?
Nice.
And he does some crazy work with some really big companies on back end automation flows. And I actually had a call with him, and I was like, "Oh, like here's what we do." Da, 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 da. And he was like, "Dude, you don't need to spend 20K to automate something. You just need like a key hire to go in and be able to patch this shit together or just run it effectively, run on a day-to-day basis." But he was like, maybe in a year or two, you need to automate some of it. But right now, you just need to start getting in those clients, building the revenue, building out the company so that then you can do that.
That's right.
But I always think about it from a software perspective, being like, am I going to run into a period where you have to rework everything? Because you know that as well, right? When you were on Python, you need to change things.
That's right.
You have to rework it. Now, is that a byproduct of business, though?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about growth being asymptotal. I mean, almost you're going to have to do rewrites constantly. And so you're going to have to break things and constantly get to the next level. You can't use the same programming when you're at 130 than you are at 220. It's a completely different ecosystem. And so there's nothing wrong with doing the rewrites. We talked about solving the problem right in front of you. Let's solve the problem right in front of you, which maybe is the model, maybe it's the promotion. It's probably not the SOPs.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned the people. So, you've hired a lot of people. You probably had to fire a couple of people in the process. What makes like a good hire and what makes a horrible hire?
There's 3 things I ask before I make every hire, which is number one, were they born to do this job? Not can they do this job, but were they born? Does this job actually light them up? Like I want a salesperson that's pumped to jump on a sales call, that wants to chat, that wants to educate, that wants to walk through different options and wants to close. They're very coin operated. They like the commission. Number 2.
I like that term.
Yeah. Number 2, would I be pumped to spend if I was on a layover in Helsinki, would I be excited? Right? If I would be dreading that flight and dreading sitting next to this person, then why am I going to be wanting to work with them 40 hours plus every single week?
Where did that come from?
Hiring people that didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, well, why didn't this person work out? They had the pedigree, they could deliver the results. And then I realized I hated jumping on a call with them. It was like nails on a chalkboard. And so I was like, it's not about the performance, it's also about the personality. And when you look at most companies where people fail, it's not in the performance, it's in the personality. And so I think that the more that you can really deeply understand, is this person not just a culture fit, culture add, but they also fit in with the personality of the business, it allows you to make sure that you're hiring a team that feels cohesive, that feels like a championship level team that's ready to win championships together. And the last one, this is the most important because oftentimes when you're hiring, the team is feeling the pain, you're feeling the pain. You're like, I need someone 3 months ago. It's very easy to settle and say yes to a position, and that's how the company starts to die. And so the last question that I ask is, would I be afraid if this person went to a competitor? And Darren, if I don't ask this question and I don't answer it honestly, it's very easy to start letting the quality slip in a company. And that's the last thing we talk about momentum. The number one thing you want to do is constantly be leveling up the talent density at your company. Because as you add, each individual increases the complexity in the business, which requires more intellectual horsepower, which requires better judgment, and requires a higher talent density in the company. But if you are hiring people that lower the average, you end up lowering the complexity of the company. You end up lowering the talent density of the company, despite the increased complexity in the company. All of a sudden, the company starts to come to a grinding halt. And so if I'm not answering yes to all 3 of those questions, were they born to do this job? Would I be pumped if I was stuck on a layover in Helsinki? And would I be afraid if they went to a competitor? If I don't answer yes to all 3 questions, it's a no for me. And I'm the final, as a CEO, you're the final recruiter and the final reviewer, and your veto overrules all.
How long would you have seen a delay between you hired someone that you needed to? Like, how many interviews would you have to do as a result? How, you typically?
How many interviews are you doing before you move
Yeah,
forward with a hire?
for instance, like if you're trying to fulfill those three criteria,
Yeah.
probably find you quite some time to find a good engineer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Would you be putting out like how do you plan for this? Because like let's give a practical example. We need an editor.
Yep.
Let's say that's hypothesis. We don't need one now, but we might need one in 3 months. Do
Mhm.
we look for someone today
Yeah.
so that then we can do the 20 interviews I need to do
Totally.
as a result to find that criteria?
So I don't know if you know this. One of my companies is actually a recruiting firm. So in the recruiting firm, what we do is we do a headcount planning tool. Most roles scale with revenue. And so, as an example, with an editor, you probably need more editors as you get more revenue.
Yep.
It's probably pretty linear. So the question is, how many editors do you have today based on how much revenue? How many editors will you need if you doubled revenue? Assuming it's not a role that's scalable, it's probably double the number of editors you need now. So then the question you'd ask is, well, how long does it take for you to onboard an editor and develop the skills to deliver the work that you're qualified for? For most roles, let's say 3 months. And so if we need someone in September, we're now looking in the summer, we need to make that hire. And then depending on the skills needed, and depending on the complexity of the role, it could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to source that candidate. And so if you need an editor in September, we need to start looking for that person in March.
Mm.
And this is advanced because most CEOs do the opposite. They wait till September when the current editor is going, I'm burnt out, I need help.
Yeah.
They kick off the search. They don't find someone until March of next year. And by then, the editor is already on the way out, or if they haven't quit already in January.
That's why understanding the heartbeat of the business is so important.
So important.
You know, that's why you know if you pull yourself out of it too often, that's why I always say to my like head of operations, I'm like, just tell me how you're feeling because I want to know like where your problem will arise from in like 3 months from now.
That's right.
Because if we could figure out the problem today, then we can make it. We could like action a step on it based as a result. You mentioned something I think it was called return on capital of employee or something along that lines. How we were actually like how much revenue you're getting from employees. This is something I didn't even know about, to be honest, until a few months ago. How do you think about that? Because obviously, like software is different than service business is different than e-commerce.
Yep.
Is there some parameters you can kind of think about around this?
So yeah, we talk about revenue per employee.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the most critical metrics. It should be on every CEO dashboard, and this prevents you from hiring too far in advance of revenue growth. And oftentimes, CEOs end up growing themselves into bankruptcy. See this happen all the time where we're making double the revenue, and I'm taking home half as much money.
I heard Chris Doe says that to you.
Yeah, it's like what just happened, and it's because you're not closely monitoring your revenue per employee. So the easy, quick formula for that is how many times does your profit margins go into $100,000? And so if you were to take your profit margin, let's say we have 15% profit margins, or let's just use 20% to keep it simple. If we have 20% profit margins, we need to have a 5x return on capital in order to make that higher, just break even. And so every $100,000 hire needs to bring in at minimum of $500,000 in revenue. And if they don't, then we're kind of wasting money on that hire. All we're doing is taking $100,000 directly off the bottom line. And so to me, at AppSumo, we had a rule where each employee needed to bring in $1 million in revenue. We had a rule of $1 million per employee. And we were able to keep that discipline up until well north of $50 million in revenue, up until the point we decided to break that rule because we were investing in the future. And so that's okay if you're understanding what you're trying to do.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Talk me through some other kind of metrics you look at. Some things I'd really kind of keep an eye on would be like LTGP over CAC. And that's basically the only thing we're kind of monitoring. So lifetime gross value over client acquisition costs, and then maybe sales velocity, but just seeing how many leads we have to conversion.
Yeah.
Do you think that's important at a smaller stage, or is this big problems for bigger companies?
No, I think it's fantastic. I mean, to me, these are the heartbeats of your business. And you're taking a look at. I mean, you're very much into fitness. You're a very fit guy. I mean, what are the metrics that you were using when you were tracking week over week, right?
I love that question. The way I describe it. Oh, I love that question because the way I say it is, I'll give you an example. We had a client. So our podcast that we run, they'll often bring in leads and so on and so forth. So people's goals are different.
Yeah.
This client in particular wanted to bring in more leads. And they said, podcast looking great, but we're not seeing any more leads. And I
Mm,
was like, how do you know? I was like, what are you using to track it? They're like, we're not tracking anything to bring in leads. I'm like, that's like trying to lose weight without a weighing scale,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
So how do you know that that's not true if you don't track it? He's like, oh, we just got an idea of it. We ended up tracking it, and it was the exact opposite.
Wow.
Bringing in loads of opportunity.
Mm,
There was loads of big deals in the pipeline that were coming through. There was hanging out in the DMs, coming through, even comments on LinkedIn is the way I kind of
wow.
would generate leads sometimes. And I was like, you're not even tracking what you need to track, and then you're complaining about the goals you didn't achieve,
Right.
right? And I always think about that with fitness as well, right?
That's
Because
right.
I have my finger on the pulse with training intensity, nutrition, recovery, sleep. I see you're wearing a wearable too in that regard, and without knowing that, how do you not know you're getting better
That's
or
right.
worse?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what gets measured gets improved. And if you aren't deeply understanding each of the most critical levers in the business, it's very dependent on every company. But let's if we were to look at all of the different categories. So for product, what matters most for product? Is it site speed? Is it repurchase rate? Is it
Mm-hmm.
average order value? For your finance and accounting, is it cash on hand? Is it inventory turnover? When you're looking at marketing, your point, are how many qualified leads are coming in month over month by channel?
Mm-hmm.
How many of those qualified leads are converting into sales? How long are those customers sticking around?
Mm-hmm.
The three most critical components of every CEO's dashboard is number of customers, repurchase rate, and average order value. And so when I look at those three numbers, I can dictate your revenue month over month, year over year. If we can increase the number of customers, if we can increase the repurchase rate, we can get them to buy more, or if we can increase the average order value, those three things alone, if we're able to increase each of those three numbers by 10%, we're growing 33% year over year. If we're able to increase each of those three numbers by 30%, we're doubling year over year.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're like, look, we're actually just going to go up by 50% in average order value and up by 10% in repurchase rate. If you have one leader on each of those three metrics, you can grow the business 2x, 3x, 4x, whatever is most important to you.
I love that. So actionable because otherwise you are technically pissing in the wind, right? If you don't have an idea of your numbers,
Yeah.
you literally are making it up.
I mean,
To my
you're
degree,
going
right?
to the gym. I mean, you're going to the gym and without remembering what you did last time.
Yeah.
You're I say this, you're exercising, you're not training. And
Mm.
there's two very different things. You're playing business, you're not running a business. And if you don't know your numbers cold, it's very difficult for you to make progress. How can you improve on something you don't know about? To your point about the leads, how do you know you don't have leads if you haven't checked your DMs?
Mm. And also, you can't make critical decisions as a result. If you're bringing in hires or you're going to make adjustments or run up a growth campaign or whatever, you don't have a good idea of your numbers and you don't have a good baseline.
You will make bad decisions.
It's wild to think that people are like that. That run big
Always.
companies.
You're going to make wildly inaccurate decisions
Yeah.
based on poor data. I mean, the greatest general of all time, Napoleon, and the movie was terrible, but he's the greatest general of all time, factually, because he's won more battles that he should have lost than any other general in history. And his number one advantage was data. I hated that they didn't go through this, but he was the original. He had the internet of the 1800s, where he had boots on the ground, scouts. What is the morale of the team that we are fighting? What are they eating? He knew everything about the enemy. You go back to Sun Tzu from 2,500 years ago, and so when we look at how you know your enemy, you're going to win every battle.
I just finished The Art of War.
Yeah,
Well.
one of the best. I mean, it's one of the best business books of all time. And so, to me, data is the foundation. I go through when we do strategic planning. It's called the MDMA framework. I use MDMA because it's easy to remember. Measure, decide, market, act. And so when you measure, that's the very first step to making a strategic decision, right? Then we decide, make those decisions based on good data. The better your data, the better the decisions. Then we have to market that to the team because just because you've made a decision doesn't mean the team is going to be bought in. And then we make an action. And then based on that action, we will then measure the results. And it's very easy to turn actions into numbers. Your P&L is a perfect example. Hey, here's what we did last month. Here are the numbers. This is why there's so many accountants. It's much more difficult to turn those numbers into proper decisions that will move those numbers. That's why there's so few billionaires.
Interesting, man. That's super unique. I want to go back over this several times. Even my own time, just walk through some of these examples, look at the numbers when going through it. I want to shift gears. Talk to me about tactical shooting. What got you into that?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think you just as a kid, you look at all these like awesome, fun action movies, and you're like,
Mm.
man, I want to be that when when I grow up. And now that I'm growing up, I'm like, well,
Okay.
fuck yeah, like I've got the money, I've got the wherewithal, I've got the
Yeah.
freedom. Like, why wouldn't I do the thing that 6-year-old Eamon wanted me to do? And so this is like one of the hobbies that I've picked up that I've really enjoyed, and it's something that I really enjoy and something I take very seriously. And it just reminds me of like one of the greatest quotes from Theoclides, which is, um, if you separate your scholars from your warriors, you will have your fighting done by fools and your thinking done by cowards.
Mm.
And so when I'm doing tactical shooting, when I'm doing boxing, when I'm doing jujitsu, I think it's very important for people not just to train their mind, but to train their body.
What's the process for like learning it? You have like is there someone who like advises you, coaches you? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a household where it was very anti-violence, very anti-guns. Like,
Mm.
we weren't even really allowed to have BB guns at home, and so this is something that I sort of had to go on off on my own. Like,
Yeah.
I remember even buying my first gun, and like it was a super small little 22, and just having it sitting there with no ammo. And I remember I couldn't sleep that night. Like I was just so nervous, just looking. I was like, I can't believe this is in my house.
Mm.
And it's like one of those things where it started with I needed to even just get comfortable around what is a very dangerous tool,
Mm.
but it's also a very valuable tool in the hands of good men. And so, starting there, then the great news is there's a lot of great educational resources out there. And so, if you can, I mean, I get trained by ex Navy SEALs, ex Delta
That's
Force,
so sick.
yeah, and
I
like
love that, man.
being able to, luckily learn from some of the best, and like I literally will learn from Israeli Special Forces sniper on how to take long range shots, and
No
learning
way.
from ex Delta Force pistol operator on how to exit a vehicle and extract myself from certain situations. Obviously, this is pure fun, right? This
Mm.
is pure fun for me, but it's a skill that I can end up learning. It's a skill that I can end up developing over time. And to me, I just really enjoy it.
So is there like places you can go here that are like set up in that
100%.
scenario?
Yeah.
Because like as a foreigner, I can't go to them. You know that, right?
Oh, really? You can't?
In North Carolina, anyway. 'Cause don't worry, I checked. I've been pissing off our parents
Really?
trying to get me to go to these ranges because
Yeah.
in Indonesia you can. Me and my mate would go there quite often. But
I
here
didn't
you
I
can't.
didn't know that. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
it's one of the great rights that we have here in America, and
mm,
I make sure to exercise that right.
damn.
Yeah,
I'd love to go with you,
yeah.
but I can't.
I wish I could take you. Yeah,
But will they have like courses set up basically, and then
totally,
yeah, that's awesome,
100%.
man.
That's I mean, there's multiple courses. I mean, if you can't do firearms, I mean, jujitsu is amazing. I mean,
Mm,
there's excellent jujitsu. I mean, paintball,
yeah.
airsoft.
I'll actually tell you the reason.
Yeah,
So I got into boxing when I was in university. I
yeah.
loved it, right? But the big thing with me, probably similar to yourself, is that when I go into something, I'm like all in,
Mm,
right? So I have to really cap what I put myself into
yeah,
because otherwise I can just go down
yeah,
a rabbit hole, right? So surfing is a good example. I got into surfing purely because I don't have my phone in the water. I
yeah,
don't think about anything else. I'm generally trying to not die when I'm
yeah.
in the water,
Totally.
for the most part, especially in Nicaragua.
Yeah,
Like water is crazy majority of the time. So it's having that thing that detaches from work and
totally.
business,
You have to.
but is like very creative, not creative, skillful,
Yeah.
difficult. Very there's a lot of like demanding physically,
Hmm.
which is really beneficial. So I try to expose myself to some things, but not everything, right?
Mm,
Because even in Indonesia, like, boxing's huge, great, or like MMA is huge as
right.
well. Thai boxing's huge. I could do all that shit, but then I would look at my P&L and be like, why are we not growing?
That's right.
Because I spent 4 hours in a ring,
That's right.
So it's difficult.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're being really intentional with the hobbies that you're picking up, and I think
Mm.
surfing is a great one. I mean, surfing just has so many excellent benefits. You
Mhm.
know, not just the exercise, the sun, the grounding, everything related to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just be really intentional with your hobbies, and there's obviously only so many hours in the day, and
Yeah.
it's really important for you to make sure that you are prioritizing your day
Mhm.
based on what's most important to you.
So how do you do that yourself? Like particularly in like focus and your
Mm,
kind of daily process
mm,
because um you've a lot going on, right?
yeah.
And you're involved in different stuff. So how do you go deep on some of the things that you're working on,
Hmm.
but at the same time you're able to achieve so much?
Journaling. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, it used to be to the point where I'd just have an empty moleskin journal, and every month, every quarter, every year, would be really intentional with like what would make this an amazing time period, and just being really intentional. And then every morning, just spending 15 minutes and going, well, what is the number one thing that I can do to move forward
Mm.
on my most critical task for this particular month? And then what would make today great? I mean, there's been moments where I'm like, you know what, today would feel a lot better if I was able to make this meaningful chunk on this new software launch that I'm about to do. So like, let me go 3-4 hours deep on this. Other days where I'm like, you know what? I wish I was on a beach today. And so I'll literally cancel all my meetings, grab my wife, and we'll head to Wilmington or
Nice.
Wrightsville. And it's an hour and a half away. And
Could
just,
surf there.
yeah, I could surf there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Do an hour and a half. And we're there on the beach and we'll spend the weekend there. And
Mhm.
so it's really just about being intentional about what would make the next day, week, month, period amazing.
Mhm.
And I think that being really intentional with that and being proactive rather than reactive, not responding to the latest Slack message or email, but rather opening up your journal, airplane mode, cup of coffee, and go, well, let's plan the day. And let's make sure we're blocking that time accordingly.
That's a challenge with like digital businesses is the fact that you could be on the beach with your wife and then like checking Slack, so you're detached from both. You're
Mm,
getting the worst of both
yeah,
versus like being at home working and then being on the beach and enjoying that.
yeah.
I do find that quite a lot, even myself. Um, but it's having that like boundaries, I guess, and being able to kind of respect the time effectively,
Mm,
which I'm still a massive like it's a massive learning curve for me in this way, right? But talking about some of that kind of health and fitness side, so you're really into the gym, you're into other aspects. How do you walk me through that as like a 7-figure like entrepreneur? Like how do you process that and go about your training and nutrition?
well, it starts with goal planning, which is what's most important for you for the next quarter.
Yeah.
I think you have to ask because oftentimes CEOs require so much mental energy and so much physical energy
Mm-hmm.
that if you're killing yourself in the gym, you literally don't have the time. So if
Yeah.
you're going through a heavy squat routine and think you're going to actually be an effective CEO, you're fooling yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you're on some PEDs, I mean, squats are going to take a lot out of you. And so I think it's important for you to regulate, well, what's most important to you over the next quarter? Are you making progress on fitness or are you maintaining? Are you making progress in the business or are you maintaining?
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts with your seasons of your life. There are definitely seasons in my life where I'm like, you know what? This is the moment where I'm going to make some gains in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So I might back off on the business and go heavier in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, it's maintenance. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I just keep maintaining what I'm doing and then picking one or two specific skills that I want to get better at? So I want to increase my VO2 max. So this particular quarter, we're going to increase our zone 2 training. I want to get better at jujitsu. So this particular week, I'm going to pay for private, or particular quarter, I'm going to pay for private lessons. I want to get better at boxing. I want to get better at surfing. So getting crystal clear on what is that one goal that's really
Mm-hmm.
important to you right now, and then based on that, if you can have a goal, if it doesn't change your calendar or your P&L, it's just a dream. And so then from there, you have to update your calendar accordingly. And so if I want to get better at jujitsu, it's got to be there three rolls, 3 sessions per week, including a private session. If I want to get better at surfing, I got to be there 7 a.m. every single morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm building my calendar around that. So that to me is most critical, just actually just getting really intentional with what you want.
Do you find that like a lot of these like 7-figure CEOs are neglecting their health completely?
Yeah, so many of them, and they're 100% neglecting their health. They're skipping the gym. They're eating like shit,
Mm-hmm.
and if they think it's not affecting their business, 100% is. And so I think the foundation for wealth is health. I think what's that quote? It's like a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, a sick person has one. And so if you're not maintaining a proper sleep regimen, diet regimen, workout regimen, I promise it will catch up to you, and I promise it's going to have an impact on your P&L.
Anti goals, right?
It's anti goals. Yep,
Right.
exactly.
Remember I was in sauna recently, like in Bali, you'd have like really high end gyms.
Mm,
They're very expensive, but basically people that are there are either people who are like soul companies or are doing pretty well, right? And I was sitting in a sauna and this guy came and you could kind of tell that he was like out of shape, a bit stressed. He wasn't really fat, but you could tell he was a bit kind of tired. And the girl was like, what do you do? And he was like, I just sold the company. And she was like, oh, that's amazing, whatever. And he was like, yeah, I'm like trying to like piece my life back since.
mm,
And he's like, it's been like a year or two. He's like doing a lot of like internal work, super stressed all the time, just trying to like put his life back together. Kind of think then makes you ask, was it worth it
right.
at that point? And now he's using that money to effectively piece his life back together.
Yeah,
It's kind of like that story of like the fisherman, right? It's like, why
that's
would
right.
why would you going out and fish every day? And the guy's asking him like, oh, why don't you hire someone? He's like, because then I can start fishing, and it keeps on going in that vicious circle, right?
That's right.
He ended up back in the same position he wanted to be in the first place.
I mean, there's no one more depressed than someone that just sold their company.
Why is that?
Oftentimes, they're selling for the wrong reason. They're selling because they are burnt out,
Mm-hmm.
because they've neglected their health, they have they didn't properly analyze the plateaus that prevented them from getting to the next level. But most importantly, they've sold their identity. Up
Mm.
until this point, they were the founder and CEO of this company, and now they're not sure what they are. They're not sure what they want to work on next. And they're not sure, I think um, as part of the hero's journey, every hero needs something to strive for.
Mhm.
And oftentimes the selling of the company for them feels like the sunset of a chapter or feels like the end of their story. And
Mm.
they're not sure what or if they can even create a new one. And the issue that they're running into, and probably the individual that is in the sauna, is they have sacrificed their health to gain wealth. And now they're spending all their wealth to gain back their health
Mm.
rather than going, how do we have a more sustainable way? There's a reason why I do what I do,
Mm.
is because I think that there is no one more important than founders to an ecosystem, because founders bend the curve of the communities they serve. And so many of them give up way too early, sell way too early, and they're sitting on an absolute gold mine, not just for themselves, but for the communities they serve.
Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah. I mean, with both companies that I sold, I'm like, everyone was celebrating around me. And internally, I felt like a failure.
Why though? Because you have the external validation to some degree. You've also achieved the goal that you set out to do to some degree. And
Well, the goal was to grow the business. I
mm,
sold because I couldn't.
but oh, you mean the initial companies?
The initial companies,
Okay,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
you still got it to that stage, though. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Mm.
At the end of the day, there's an internal goal that you have. And to me, selling both was waving the white flag.
What was your like next action from there? Because a lot of founders will jump in. I have a friend, a very close friend, who's selling off his company right now, and hope to have sold it for a lot more, probably around 50 million, but it's been a lot less just because of the market and everything. And he's gone into coaching now, and I think he ran up like 100K a month already. He's a lot older than me, like he's in his late 50s. Um, he's jumped back in. What's your thought process on that?
I mean, 100,000 per month. There's got to be a really good coach.
Yeah, he's been at this like
Yeah.
30, 40 years, right?
Okay. So, I mean, if you're spending that much, you got to assume that that's getting him back to 50 million valuation plus. And so, what is $1 million a year if it ends up resulting in 30 extra million in the back end?
Mm.
So, at the end of the day, it comes back to those investments. I will say we always go back to minimum effective dose. Did he need to spend that much in order to get the same results? I don't know. Sometimes you need to pay in order to pay attention. For him, he may have needed to pay that much in order to actually follow the advice.
Mm. No, I mean he's ran up a coaching business, his own business.
Oh, he's ran up. Oh,
Sorry,
okay,
sorry,
sorry.
sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
So he's
I thought he was spending that.
no, no. He sold his company, right, for
Okay,
context, and then instead of kind of taking a break, he jumped straight back in,
okay,
and now he's built out a coaching program,
gotcha,
and he's got up to like 100K already,
gotcha.
which is pretty kind of wild in the first month,
Right.
because he had a lot of very high net worth individuals who
Mm,
wanted his advice, and it's on a bespoke model, kind of like yourself.
right.
Um, so he didn't take that break, is what I'm saying, by
Gotcha.
selling a company.
Yeah. I don't know this individual, so I don't want to
Of
comment
course.
on their life. I just want to make sure that he's not just chasing the next dollar or coming to it from a scarcity mindset,
Mm-hmm.
where sometimes you've just sold something and you immediately get into a mindset where I don't want to see the bank account dwindle. And so I'm going to jump into whatever it takes in order to fund my current lifestyle
Mm.
to keep the bank account growing. And as long as he's enjoying it and he's having a great time, as long as he's doing it from purity of heart, amazing. I think that's absolutely fantastic. There's nothing wrong with not taking a break. But for most people, it definitely helps to just take a step back, spend 6 months after an exit,
Mm.
and do nothing monetarily motivated and see where the passions take you. See where your entire life up until that point, you've been rowing aggressively towards a target.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time that you are allowed to float on the river and see where it takes you. And I think if you don't take advantage of those moments, you fail to see the life of magnetism that
Mm-hmm.
attracts you to what your true passions are.
And that's what you'd find often in those careers of like legal and finance, things that you didn't necessarily get into because you're super passionate about it. There's a lot of opportunity,
Yeah,
right? That's the problem with that's how I got into it.
yeah.
Is that they said they were making a lot of money. You don't really make that much money as an employee in there, right?
Hmm.
But that's the lure. Okay. I want to talk about wealth. So levels of wealth. Level 1, want to make enough money to retire. Level 2, make enough to retire. Level 3, never wants to retire. What brought you to that realization?
You know, on the path to financial independence, you're always going like, what's my fire number? Are you familiar with fire number?
No.
Okay. So fire number is this fire community, which is if I hit a certain number,
Mm.
I can earn 4% off that money. You're familiar with this?
Yeah.
And I can basically live off of the interest forever, including inflation, and never touch the principal. And so for every million, I earn 40,000. So if you need to make 80,000, I just need to save $2 million in the market, and I can live $80,000 a year
Mm.
for free, never touching the principal. It's from the Trinity study. And so up until that point, you're always focused on that number. Like I need to get to 5 million, 10 million. Once I get to 10 million, I can make, $400,000 a year, just pure interest, never touching my principal. But once you hit that number, then you go, well, this is it. Like what's next? And
Mm.
you end up realizing like the reason that you're probably chasing that number is because you don't enjoy what you're currently doing. Now that money is no longer at the table, you can then focus on this opportunities that are in front of you that are no longer monetarily motivated.
Mm.
You can focus on the things that you would do even if no one were to pay you for it and even if no one were to ever find out. And so once you've crossed that chasm, it allows you to then focus on the things that actually move the real needle, the needle in your heart.
Mm.
And that's when true alignment. And the beautiful thing about that is if you recognize that this is true for most people, you can start to work towards that even before you hit your number.
I love that. I always think about that because it's a lotto test, right? If you won the lotto, what would you do?
That's right.
I would do exactly this.
So you've basically won.
Yeah,
You
well, that was the idea. Was
yeah.
like to build a. So when I left the world of finance, was to build something around my podcast,
Mm,
and because I was like really good at running the back end stuff, it was just it made a lot of sense to do this for other people. Basically.
amazing.
But that was the idea, though, and like we've had opportunity to sponsor the show, but instead we kind of showcase the business because it makes more sense from a cannibalization perspective.
Right.
Like why bring in like a couple $1,000s for sponsorship when you can sell $100K a year client.
That's right.
So that's kind of the idea, and that comes from my finance days. But that was the idea, right? And was like, I'm just going to be recording this, and I often think about it. I'm not at the point yet, but that holding company aspect or building out a portfolio of companies. I believe now at 27 that when I'm 60, I want to be investing in the people that are like me at 27. Does that make sense?
100%.
Because I'm interested in the game, and it's the infinite loop.
That's right.
The infinite game. Play the infinite game whereby you never really actually want to get out of it because what else would I do?
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
And every time you're going back to that journal and you're going, is this something that I would do after I won the lotto? And if not, how do we tweak that accordingly? And the fact that you were being very intentional and now you've built a life that has passed the lotto test, I think is number one, that's very rare. And I commend you for doing it so young.
Appreciate it.
And I think it's that to me is the ultimate game is how are you crafting a life that even if no one will ever find out and even if you weren't making any money for what you're doing, this is the life that you want to live. I mean, to me, one of my favorite definitions of hell is at your last day on earth, the person you could have become meets the person you are.
Mm.
And you get to shake that person's hand. I mean, could you imagine? And so the fact that you're living that life today, I think is a great testament to the way you're being intentional with how you're crafting your life.
Intentional is a word, right? Because the reason why it kind of ended up like that too is because Kickoff Session started as a career podcast because at the time I wanted to become CEO of Goldman Sachs. And then I realized as time went on that was not a good idea. So when I was interviewing people, they'd often been people who had left the corporate world and they were building these online businesses. And then I started moving towards that approach. And because it was so focal, and what's focal is causal, because it was always around me, I just became that entity.
Mm.
So it nearly felt worse if I wasn't being like that, and I was like a hypocrite. So another test was like when I was hearing people like yourself, who's healthy, balanced, has that good lifestyle. If I was out partying and doing things that were at odds to that, I felt a hypocrite. So when I was living much more in alignment with it, it made way more sense to be like, all right, we're flying in here. We're going to meet Ayman today. We're going to record because I'm just generally interested in it. And it's much more in alignment.
That's amazing.
Which meant I had to give up all the other lifestyle.
Totally.
Right? Because I'm from Ireland.
Yeah.
Irish people drink all the time.
Yeah.
I haven't drank in like 500 days.
Wow. Congratulations.
Not because I had to take a break from it, because it was the wrong identity. Does that make sense?
100%.
And that's the reason why I'm recommending this for people is because the more you're in this kind of space where you're listening to podcasts and you're learning, you get more exposed to it. So then therefore you're moving towards that ideal identity.
100%.
And that seems woo-woo until you do it. And I would have been the person that would have shat on it many years ago.
Yeah.
But it's only until you come through that, I guess, self-development like vehicle of like a business or a podcast or a newsletter or a blog or whatever it is that you really realize like what you kind of want to be and who you don't want to be.
Yeah, I mean, the reason they're cliches is that they're true,
Mm.
you know, and they do say you become the average of the 5 person you spend the most time with. That includes the podcasts that you're consuming.
Yeah, and
The books.
you were like, who are you recording with in New York? And I was like, here are the guys.
That's right.
Here's what they do.
That's
And
right.
they're not just flashing big numbers, right? They're good, genuine, honest guys. And I think I asked Justin, it was about like what he's kind of concerned about or what it worries him. And then he was saying to me, like, once you do the inner work, everything else is okay, right? And there's a lot of work on the inside because, he's grown $2 billion companies.
Mm-hmm.
So now the inside work that he does allows him to build this great business that's going to do over 5 million. It's already past 5 million, because he did that work first, right? And it's very interesting to see his evolution, even as an example.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Justin's a great guy, and obviously he's doing an incredible job the last few years. But I think even on your podcast, he was mentioning, this is a 10-year plus journey to get here.
That's what people don't see.
They don't.
Right?
Yeah, they see the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, well, they only see the finish line.
That's right.
That's the very end.
Yeah.
Ayman, I
Darren,
want to say a massive thank you, man.
no, it was a pleasure. Thank you so
man.
much. Appreciate you.